Yeah,
That's great.
yeah, you spent quite a bit of time in Whistler, right?
I did, and I lived in Banff for almost 7 years.
Oh, wow, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was a coach and instructor at Sunshine Village.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Vancouver for almost my whole adult life there for a while, and yeah,
Oh
you're.
wow.
I noticed you shot the most of the connected universe there.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful.
Because the producer was from Vancouver.
Right. Yeah, I kind of figured
Right.
that something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm ready to rock
All
and
right.
roll. You guys ready to do this thing?
Yeah.
Have some fun?
Yep.
Right on.
Yeah. Let's go.
All right, we've got a long-awaited show here. We've got Nassim Haramein with us. He's the founder of the Resonant Science Foundation. Most of our listeners have heard us talk about your work before. You've written a couple awesome papers. One of them, like, being the quantum gravity and the holographic mass. You've also established Taurus Tech, which has made the ARK crystals. We had a little synchronicity a while back where like 3 or 4 guests in a row were wearing your ARK crystals. So we're not. I'm not going to say we're very familiar with your work. We try, and our listeners have heard a lot about you. But it's great to have you on. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that's great. Fellow Canucks
Yeah.
up there in the north.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Like we were talking about before the show, I used to live up there in Whistler and endure the warm weather of the minus 40s and the cold weathers of the minus 60s.
Yeah, we just came from winter to summer directly. Like it feels like last week or this week. We
It's
just
beauty
switched.
today.
We switched gears from winter to summer. So
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was thinking because we've had a few of your colleagues on before, so listeners are pretty familiar with your work, and I thought maybe we could start kind of jump into the deep end a little bit. Maybe talk about. I wanted to thank you first of all about putting your classes on for free there at the Resonant Science Foundation. I kind of signed up, watched your first few lectures, you and Marshall Efforts, fantastic stuff. So I wanted to thank you for that, and I'm glad to see there's already thousands and thousands of people signing up. So this must be a great opportunity for you to get your theories out there and get people thinking differently.
Yes, it's great. I mean, it's been a hard, this period has been hard for the foundation because of the whole, quarantine. And the foundation was very much part of a program, had a program that was about traveling to very exotic countries and going to ancient sites. And so we had to cut that out completely, and which produced some difficulties for the foundation. But at the same time, I felt like, well, people are at home and they need something else than mainstream media to look at. And, I thought, okay, I got to put it out, for people to be able to study at home during this time. And it's been great. There's 20,000 people taking the course right now, and
Wow.
it's dynamic. People are really enjoying it. The people are participating on the forum. It's really nice to see, and I'm really excited as well because I'm in the midst of publishing a whole new section of the physics, and it's so exciting.
Wow, that's
I'm
great.
so amazed as what we found.
What is that new physics you're looking at? You're publishing on?
I finished part of the holographic mass equation that I've been wanting to finish for years. That had to do with scaling it so that we could account for all of the different scales in the universe. I already had found that, of course, the proton scale obeyed the right condition, and that I was able to predict the radius of the proton, and it got confirmed. It's now co-data, by the way, since last year.
That's great.
So,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That is the official value for the proton radius. and then we applied it to the electron and it worked out, and we applied it to the universe and it worked out. It gave us the right size, the right mass, and now it's giving as well for the universe the right temperature, and which is really important. It's the background temperature of the universe. There's no theoretical model that outputs that without the need for dark matter or dark energy. And ours outputs exactly in the mean value of all the measurements they've been doing for the last 10 years. So we know we're in exactly where we need to be. And at that cosmological scale, to have that kind of precision is insane. Yeah. It's like never been seen, never mind for the background radiation, right? The CMB. And so we now have applied the whole holographic mass solution to every scale. So superclusters, clusters, stars. Of course, all these things are different sizes, but the equation outputs the means, of all these things very, very clean. In case of stars, we're comparing to like 10,000 stars and large, statistical number on the, on the chart, and we're like exactly in the means. And so same thing with galaxies and so on. And so we know now that we have all the scales, and as we outputted the scales, fundamental constants outputted at the same time. And I'm really excited because one of them is G, or the gravitational constant. And the gravitational constant is one of the less well-measured value in physics. It's a big problem in physics. And every time you put G in an equation, the resolution of your solution is reduced to about 4 to 5 numbers after the period. Significant numbers are reduced because in quantum theory, you can have precision to like 10 to 14 digit, like the G factor, which is like, for instance, the magnetic moment, or, you can have the Reinberg constant, alpha. These things are known to very high level of precision. So it's been a big problem in physics that G is only a measured value and it can't be measured with more than 5-digit precision. And so our model, as we scale down and up this scaling universe, outputted like G in a very clean way from the mathematics with some 11 numbers of precision. And we know it's correct, although it can't be measured that far, because the same mathematics outputs, the Reinberg constant with like 11-digit precision. It outputs the G factor with 14 numbers of precision and all this stuff. So we know that we have G till almost 11, or at least 11 numbers of precision. And so now we have a way to make quantum theory much more precise and relate the cosmological scale and quantum theory so that you have this type of precision at the cosmological scale, which is it's not, there's no match in physics to that. So, yeah.
And besides the science, I mean, the real important work of this is being able to prove this or write the equations that help people realize that we are all connected, that this is a connected universe, and that changes our paradigm. And after watching your first 3 intro videos on your courses there with Marshall, it kind of gave me some hope for the future that, this will open up things and open up technologies and more of a chance for free energy and that kind of stuff, like being able to pull energy out of the ether, that you're proving exists, like the ancients did. Like Hermes Trismegistus, one of his principles was vibration. I mean, how did he know vibration was the key back then? And now you're starting to prove that on paper, right?
That's what
Yeah,
Tesla
well,
said too.
all the ancient people knew about these things, because if you look at many cultures around the world, they talked about this fundamental field of that oscillated, that vibrates, like you were saying, and they called it many different things throughout the ages. Like one of the more recent way it was conveyed was called the ether, and that was in physics theory until Einstein. But like all electromagnetic fields equations from Maxwell were written with an ether. The concept that it was that space was not empty, and it was oscillating, but not just oscillating in chaotic way. It made vortices, and these vortices, Maxwell literally described the electromagnetic field as vortices with little balls in it, which were the particles, and got the right answer for the electromagnetic radiation that we observe and all this. So the fact is that he had an ether, he had, and some of the greatest physicists we have today, like Frank Wilczek, give talks about how one of the biggest error that happened in physics is that we removed the ether. He even called us children of the ether. And this is a Nobel Prize winner in physics. He should be taken seriously when he says that. It's funny, but it's serious. He's saying that all the material world emerged from this fundamental field, and as well as the possibility that consciousness is literally an emanation of that same field, and thus it's all one thing, right? And it's not only the fact that it's all one thing that way, but it's actually all one thing literally, because it is entangled through wormholes. And people don't realize that this is not a new idea. Like John Wheeler and actually Einstein and Rosen in the 40s came up with papers that describe wormholes for the first time in physics. When they did that, people think that they described wormhole at the cosmological scale, at the big scale, but they didn't. They described cosmological, wormhole at the atomic level to attempt to map quantum physics to wormhole dynamics in the structure of space-time. People don't realize that. They talk about wormhole all the time. It's in science fiction, but it's always at the cosmological scale, where in fact, all the atomic scale is actually wormholes as well. The whole thing is connected. It's all connected to one field. And when that field spins, it makes small stuff we call atoms or galaxies or superclusters or universes that we see in our cosmological scale.
So is this is probably the furthest a competing theory has got that's been able to unify the small and the bigs, the micro and the macro. Is there anything else that's competing right now? Like there was string theory a while back, or are we kind of, it seems like in a lot of ways and on a lot of different frontiers, we're sort of tipping over some of these pillars of science.
Right. The paper that I'm publishing, you were asking what I'm working on. This is the paper I'm publishing. So I can't, say it's the most advanced because it's not published yet, but I'm just saying, like, there's two things. For instance, string theory that you mentioned. Well, string theory is wonderful, and thousands of people have worked on it, and millions of dollars have been spent. But it has not succeeded in 2 decades in producing any physical evidence. There is no way to measure or to confirm the theory with measurement. Not one measurement has been able to confirm string theory, which is why most physicists have abandoned it, or there's still physicists working on it. However, it's a much smaller group now. But in the case of this theory, the radius of the proton that the theory predicts, which is 4% smaller than the standard model, has now become the official value that all physicists use. That's why I mentioned co-data earlier, to describe the size of the nuclei of an atom. Now you might say, well, 4% is not much difference between your theory and the standard model. The problem is that, remember I was telling you about all these constants that have a lot of accuracy. They all need the radius of the proton to be accurate, cannot be off by 4%, because then it has repelling effect, like repeating effects in the whole theory that eventually gets the whole thing falls apart. So that's why it's been a big problem for physicists. Although it was measured in 2013, I published in 2012 the prediction. Although it was measured in 2013, it was not accepted right away, because of course it was like throwing the pillar of the standard model out the window. So it took a while, and the measurement at the time was done with muons, which are heavy electrons. And so physicists were saying, well, maybe the shorter radius is due to the surface of the proton flexing when it's being hit by such a heavy particle. So they repeated the measurement in different accelerators all the way until 2018, where they actually were able to measure it more accurately with the normal technique, which is the electron. And interestingly enough, in order for them to get the correct radius, they realized that they had to throw out the standard model calculation to get the correct radius. So this is much more solid, on much more solid ground than string theory or any other unification theory, for that matter.
So did they call you up after that and were like, way to go, Nassim, you nailed it?
No.
No? You're still waiting?
I might have missed that call. Yeah. I get so many calls.
Yeah, another Nassim Haramein got it out of the blue. So where do you think unified field theory will be in 20 years?
Oh, I think in 20 years, we will be on our way to visiting our solar system in a similar way that we are visiting our planet today, in a more casual way than burning rocket fuel, to try to get a few miles up, and then kind of hanging in there, in orbit. Gravity control is going to be a very strong focus, and result of this understanding of physics. Just like I was saying earlier, G is going to be known, and not just known. The fact that the theory output G tells you how G works, where Einstein field equation tells you that gravity is the result of space-time curving. It doesn't tell you what space-time is made of, right? So it's not very useful if you're trying to figure out how to curve space-time artificially. But to the contrary, this theory tells you what space-time is made of. It's made of little particles, that are fluctuations.
The Planck fluctuations?
I'm sorry?
The Planck fluctuations?
The Planck fluctuations, exactly that. The Planck scale, much smaller than the atom, like billions of times lower and smaller than the atom, and higher in frequency, thus, shorter wavelength than the atom, is the Planck field, the energy field, the ether, the mana, of creation, and from there emerge all the material world. That's what the theory, including gravity. So all of a sudden, you get that space-time is no longer some mathematical model in Einstein field equation, but it's a real thing that's oscillating. And when it curves, it produces gravity. Now you know how to produce gravity.
I have a note here to ask you about the size of the Planck versus the proton, because when you describe that in your video, it's quite amazing. Like the Planck to the proton is like the proton to 4 light years away or something like that.
Well, yeah, so imagine, like people say, well, if the space is full of these vibrations and they're so energetic, right? The mass is 10 to the 93 grams per centimeter cube. It's huge, right? How come I don't feel them? Well, it's because you don't feel a lot of the electromagnetic field around you, right? So like radio wave, microwave, infrared, all the stuff, ultraviolet, background radiation from the galaxy, like all that's going through you right now. You have no clue, right? Well, if you look at the electromagnetic field, like you can go shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter wavelength. Eventually, you get below the atom, you get to the Planck scale. And we know the Planck scale is there because it's the base of how we know that the electron quantized, and that's how we discovered photons. And this is the base of quantum mechanics. That's when quantum mechanics was very much classical. Well, we know those are fundamental units, like they're natural units. Like we call them natural units because like the foot is not a natural unit. Like it's the foot of some king that decided to be a foot, right? Like the meter, right, is related to the earth, but it's not fundamental. In this case, the Planck length is like pulled right out of gravity, of the speed of light, of the electromagnetic field. And so basically this very teeny thing, the wavelength of this thing, if you grew it to be a grain of sand, so you grew a little Planck grain of space-time, so it was a grain of sand, then the proton would have a diameter from the sun to Alpha Centauri, which is about 40 trillion kilometers. So, that's how small this oscillation is. So of course you don't feel it. It's present, but you don't feel it because it's not anywhere close to where you would register it with your body, but as well, it's nowhere close to where we would measure it with our devices.
But what about your memory or your consciousness? I mean, I read a paper that you had on your site that it seemed to me like, and it was way over my head, but it seemed to me that it was kind of saying you guys have found evidence for memory and awareness being not just a mechanical, like a mechanical or chemical active part of your mind, but you're connected to something greater.
Right.
I can't remember what the paper was called. I've got it here somewhere, but it seems
it's called Space Memory Network.
Yeah.
And then it has a subtitle. But the Space Memory Network paper actually was cited by really good researchers in the Netherlands very soon after it was published. And I was pretty happy to see that there was a lot of interest. With the new equations I'm going to publish, it's going to get much better. This was a first, iteration, a first approximation, but already it showed clearly that in the context of this understanding of unification, that complex system emerge from information flow through this field. So imagine you got this field of information, right, that we're calling the Planck field. It's everywhere. Or this field of energy, you can think of it as information, just like you think about the internet.
Or the Akashic records.
You could call it that way, yeah. The ancient civilization knew about that as well. And then you can imagine that, this field of information it organizes like vortices, and these vortices organize in larger ones and larger one and larger one, and they eventually make cells, and these cells organize into more complex system, and eventually, you know, you got 100 trillion cells or 40 to 100 trillion cells in your body, and you know, you have enough DNA to like go around the world like 5 million times in one body. And so you can think of all this as information exchange, right, with this fundamental energy. And when you calculate this the energy exchange, eventually you would have a complex system, biological system that could become self-aware. It could become aware that it is part of this field, you know, and that it is individualized. But it might become aware that it's individualized first, and then become aware that it's part of this field, just like a fish would all of a sudden figure out, oh, I'm part of the water, like, you know, I'm made of water and there's water all around me, right? But it might discover that later. You would discover first that it's a fish, right? And then discover it's part of a larger thing that is its field. And basically you could describe consciousness like the body being an antenna in this field of information, just like a radio set is an antenna, you know, in the field of electromagnetic fields of, you know, frequencies of the radio frequency, right? This is like, we're like radio set of the Planck frequency.
When you get down to that Planck scale, is it similar to what we see at like the atomic scale, where it's still mostly nothing?
Well, you know, just like the fish is made out of water, you know, when you look at the atomic scale, it's made out of what?
Planck's?
Yeah, but I mean, when we look closely, like at the electron, the proton, whatever, all we see is charge, right?
Energy.
And, yeah, that's all we see. Like the radius of the proton or the electron, whatever, are just definition of a section of space that has a high density electrostatic field that we call a particle. It's not a thing. It's not like a billiard ball down there. It really isn't. And actually, when you look at the difference between the proton, the nuclei of the atom, and the space, and then the electron, the atoms that we are made of, and all the existing world around you is made of 99.9999999% space. And this space, so basically our reality is space with a little jiggle in it, okay? And we know that this space is full of energy. So there's a good chance the jiggle is the result of the space, not the other way around. You see? So basically what we call reality is a leak of or an exchange of information through the field.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, that means it's
It kind of goes
somewhat malleable, it would seem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of
You
goes.
might have to drop,
Go ahead.
You might have to drop mushrooms to integrate it, but when you do, it's all good.
You know, it's funny you say that, because you mentioned the part about the fish realizing it's in the water. And
well, that's what people usually report from those experiences.
I was on a bunch of mushrooms there on the show. If you get the black budget, you'll get the episode where I ate the mushrooms on the show.
Okay.
And someone came walking. We were in the basement, and someone came walking down the stairs. And as they came walking down the stairs, I could feel the vibrations, like of it, like thumping through the airspace. And I started talking about how I was like a fish underwater, how I'm like a bottom feeder, just walking around at the bottom of the sea of air.
And I wasn't. And there's no way I could sense or feel anything. I don't even think I could hear the person coming down the stairs.
No, you looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, the perception, you know, what those things do is they change the perception. It's like you tuning the antenna to a higher frequency. All of a sudden, the the data rate goes down, goes up through the roof. Next thing you know, it's like you can have extrasensorial experiences, and awarenesses that you didn't have before. The problem is you have to be able to integrate it when you come back, and that's where, it can be some, like, I call it impedance, in the information flow.
I'm still trying to integrate my last DMT experience.
Well, I do like how you mentioned there are all these paranormal things, like whether it's remote viewing or remote healing. I mean, this is leading us to an actual mechanics for that to happen. It's not like people tend to think it's either spiritual or it's physical, it's materialistic or it's not. But I think what you're saying and proving here is that it is all connected physically, and once you get down to that level, it becomes almost spiritual.
Right.
That's the way people would see it.
Well, I'm known for saying that spirituality is the physics we haven't understood yet.
Yeah.
So, clearly, consciousness being a relationship to the Planck field, from consciousness, all these equations of physics, all the comprehension we have from the world, everything we experience, it's all subjective to our consciousness being able to describe it. You can't get out of that, right? It is a direct consequence of us expressing ourselves, right? And so you can't really separate consciousness from physics, because it's our interpretation of the world that we're writing in the physics, right? And so the whole thing, if now physics can explain how you became conscious, it's like the hand that's drawing the hand. It's like, it's like you close the loop. Basically, you understand from the physics how your consciousness got there to write the physics.
And then you cease to exist.
But, the thing is that it literally is like that in the equation, meaning the equation is a recursive fractal equation that gives all the scales. And it is exactly that. It's the answer is feeding back into the equation, and it, it creates scales that way.
It's funny how all those great numbers like pi and phi, and they always seem to be like those weird never ending, or I forget what the irrational numbers.
Yeah, irrational numbers. Yeah. And they're found everywhere. Well, phi is found everywhere in nature. And that tells you something, that geometry's got to be involved. It has to create the natural world. It's clearly there. For instance, all of the biggest Hollywood, rendering farms for like animation, CGI, and all this, they all use fractals equation when they want to make the natural world look natural. Like when they make a new planet with all kinds of crazy wildlife on it, and but they want it to look natural, like make a plant that looks natural, but that's purple, or some color that is hard to see, that it can't be from Earth, or something, but it has the natural look. Or even when they're trying to reproduce in CGI the natural look of the Earth, they use those fractal equations, and they use these fundamental numbers that produce this kind of fractal structures that reproduce the natural world. So the fact that those numbers are there in the world, in the natural world, tells you that there is mathematical precision to the universe.
Is that how you ended up? Was it you that ended up designing the ARK crystal, or how did that whole thing come about? It sounds like that's kind of leading towards designing your own thing like that.
Sure. If you think of those equations and what they say about space-time, then you start making technology that would interact a little bit with the structure of space-time, although you know, it's like, okay, space-time is shaking. How can I shake with it? You know, let's let's literally make a milkshake. You know, let's make a little vortex in space-time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's resonate exactly. And definitely when you look at the way you could do that in a laboratory, you would use, things that are producing electromagnetic fields that are that can resonate well, right? Well, okay, you get a bunch of things, but at the end of the day, you would find that the technology uses a piece that is resonating, right, in all of their devices, and they happen to be crystals, right? They run all of our technology, all of our oscillators or crystalline wafers that we cut very, very thinly and that we oscillate at high frequency. And so if you want to go to a high frequency, you'd use, good crystals that are pure and all this. And so eventually you get to the place where you think, oh, okay, maybe using a crystal and oscillating it, like spinning an oscillating field at high enough frequency in its vicinity might structure the space in the crystal in such a way that it would create a little field in that field of a field of coherency, a little vortex in that field of fluctuations that makes up reality. And it's not a crazy thought. It's like, oh, okay. And so you start going at it and you start trying to make a vortex. And I made a pretty good vortex. And I realized I could modify the structure. Sorry, I have my kid here. Hi. It's okay. We're in confinement. I usually be in the lab, but it's okay. It's my younger staff,
Test subjects.
Yeah. Oh no, they're my masters. They're my master. I eventually made a crystal that oscillates and that was able to maintain oscillation from the restructuring of the space inside them, so that they produce this little coherency wherever they are. And it was pretty well sustained. Like I did it in 99 first time, and I picked that geometry of a tetrahedron because I wanted to oscillate the space most closely related to its geometry at the Planck scale. So I tried to match the geometry, right? And then and cut it very precisely, and then put it in this vortex field, and then see if I could get some residual effect. And the crystal I was able to charge then or modify then are still active today and doing about the same that they were doing then. So I know it's resilient. And the effect that it has generally is that it modifies the water molecule, meaning it changes the water molecule, it structures it a little bit so that it's more energetic. And so when you expose water to it, the water changes and becomes a little more energetic. We can measure it in laboratory. It's very solid. And when you give it into plants, they grow faster, bigger, stronger. They're more healthy. They're more resistant to pathogens, to invasions. And so kind of like the fruits are much bigger. They make much more fruits. Their seeds are much more viable. So it has a very positive effect on plant growth, and thus anything that functions on water, which include human beings.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Is there other ways that you're going to apply these theories into technology? Like you mentioned G and anti-gravity a couple times, and it just and now talking about the geometric shapes, it really makes me think about this. I saw this UFO in Israel with a group of people, and it was a dodecahedron or an icosahedron shape. and it was quite
Wow.
large in the sky, and it was spinning. The halves were spinning against itself, and it was floating quietly
Wow.
through the sky. And I mean, you talked about, well, that's going to be the next 20 years. We're going to have some of this technology, but I mean, some people
It
think
might
that
not be that advanced.
yeah,
you know?
yeah. But I mean, something's flying around in anti-gravity right now. I mean,
Right.
do you think it's somebody's got it there, or is it just? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have many thoughts on that. I don't know. I mean, first of all, it's important for the listeners to understand, I'm coming from the scientific perspective, but I am an honest scientist. So like, I just look at the data, and the data is kind of like overwhelming. And so it's like, if you do just a little research, even, let's just take the number of inhabitable stars in our galaxy alone, that are planets that in our galaxy alone. In the amount of stars that have planets is remarkable. In fact, we're having a hard time finding stars that don't have planets, and many of these planets are in the Golden Lock region, where they are not too hot, not too cold. They could have water on it. We know some of them have. There's a lot of water in the universe. We know that now. It's everywhere. And so I think as of 2013, there was the estimate based on statistic of what they had found, right, was about 40 billion planets in our galaxy alone that could sustain life. So just that fact should okay, so just so we know, 20 years ago in physics conference, I would have let's just call them long-winded arguments with physicists about the possibility of life on Earth, in the universe. And I wasn't even insinuating anything close to those numbers. I was just saying, maybe in the whole universe, right, there could be a planet with water on it with life, right? I was just going for one, so now at this point, of course, most physicists say, okay, yeah, there's most likely life out there, quite a bit, and there could be a lot of advanced life. Now consider that some of these planets might have 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000 years on us, right? Imagine what we've done in 150 years of, scientific investigation and application on our planet. We went from horse and buggy to, satellites and launching rockets and so on, and having cell phones. What does your cell phone or your computer looks like 1,000 years from now, right? How many upgrades did you get, right? And what does your mode of motivation that used to be a plane and a rocket looks like, right? 1,000 years. Never mind 1,000,000 years, right? 1,000,000 years later, right? Hopefully you're able to control gravity. Okay, this is where I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, you've understood how gravity works, and you know what it is, right? You figured out it's something like space-time, but you know what space-time is made of. And you realize you can make wormholes. You realize you can traverse large distances, at most likely faster than the speed of light, at least through wormholes. And you can go pretty well anywhere you want in the galaxy or even extragalactic. So, this kind of things are not if you want to know what science facts are going to look like, you look at science fiction and you subtract, 50, to 100 years, right? And it's not a linear curve, so actually it's accelerating. So at this point, you can subtract 20 to 50 years. And so I'm just saying, there's a pretty good chance that extraterrestrial have visited our planet because of the sheer numbers. And then when you look at the evidence throughout history of having had contact with extraterrestrial communities, it's not only in the archaeology, but in modern times, there's like very strong evidence, including 2 days ago, the Pentagon, releasing officially, footage from, pilots, chasing down UFOs.
Do you think it's a possibility that consciousness could exist on the different fractals of reality? Like when you look at when you're looking at the Planck scale or the atomic scale or everything okay?
I'm sorry. Are you okay, Munchkin? Oh, okay. Yeah, don't.
Hope everyone's okay.
Be careful.
How about you? Are you okay, Munchkin?
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
He's good.
I just like when you start to look at, say, the Milky Way, for example, on the scale of like zoomed out, look at the Milky Way, and you look at maybe that supermassive black hole at the center as being like the nuclei of an atom or something like that. It almost seems to scale like that. And
yeah.
And if it's all sort of just energy anyway, then it seems like a possibility that the cells inside my body are maybe there's some sort of weird reality going on for them. Like I remember watching an old like science show back in like 80s where it like zoomed into Buddy's shoulder. And at first it showed like these germs crawling around on him. But as it kept zooming in, all of a sudden it zooms in. It's like this bustling street and there's shops open. And it's like maybe the cells inside my body can only operate if they've got some sort of sense of meaning. You got to build in a sense of meaning. Like us going to work, this is just some sort of subset reality for us, somewhere in the shoulder blade of some mega being.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you can like these concepts have been there for a long time. Like ancient civilization talked about the inner world, as being the path to the other world, and like the connection between the big and the small. We could be an atom. Our universe could be an atom in the shoulder of a giant. However, it looks a little more, I think, like how do you say, like fractal structures or division in the structure of space, meaning that it's not gonna necessarily organize as biological life at all scales. The biological life might be different scales depending in which universe they're in, but the universes in this fractal universe thing are embedded within each other. Right? So they're not parallel. And that's important to understand. So that means that each point is in relationship with the whole fractal thing, whether you go up or down. So it's coordinated. It's best to think of the fractal instead of biological fractals as like, spheres within spheres, like Russian dolls, within each other to infinity, right? From infinitely big to infinitely small, which includes sub-Planckian links, So out of our scales, after we prove all the rest of the stuff, we go more speculative, you could call it, but we're pretty confident, because we output a smaller scale than the Planck scale, because you can continue to divide. And of course, if it's smaller, that means it's oscillating faster than the speed of light, because the Planck scale is oscillating at the speed of light. So now this thing is oscillating at 10 to the 40th, the speed of light. So I don't know if people understand exponent, but there's about 10 to the 40th centimeter difference between the radius of the proton and the size of the universe. So, something that's going 10 to the 40th faster than the speed of light, to you would appear as instantaneous, right? And so this is the flow of the information that we need to access in order to translate the universe, in order to like go from one side of the universe to the other. Like we could go from one side of the universe to the other at 10 to the minus 17 seconds. Like that would be how long it takes, which is like a very, 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 very teeny amount of time. You don't have time for the peanuts or the jet lag, or, you know, you don't get the nice meals or anything like that. You just leave and you arrive pretty well, you know, for you, it's instantaneous. So that's a possibility. That'd be nice.
Just translate that into technology. You know, we'll have our anti-gravity craft.
So-
I mean,
Is that why you start getting into holographic when you see those things oscillating at the speed of light? Because that's almost like, I mean, was it Richard Lighthouse we were talking to about how it seemed like the universe is sort of blinking in and out of existence all the time?
Right. Well, it's oscillating. So we would see it as blinking out in and out of existence, but it's not. It's just exchanging information. So when it exchanges information, right, it's like a semiconductor, right? I'm trying not to get too technical, but think of a crystal oscillating is a semiconductor oscillating, and it's piezoelectric. It produces, electromagnetic oscillation because an electron falls into a hole, right? Basically, and this principle give the right answer for the amount of energy, and so on, and basically what is, I'm sorry, my son is doing all kinds of things.
It's okay.
Hey, Munchkin, Mushy, don't, it's okay.
Looks like a nice sunny day.
Yeah.
It almost matches the window in the window. Could just be a continuation, except our trees don't have leaves yet. We're still a month away from having leaves on trees.
The universe was interrupted.
That's okay.
Chaos theory.
Yes. My universe was interrupted with another one.
They overlap sometimes.
They do. The vortices, they collide, and then smaller ones come out.
We don't want to keep you too long, so maybe we could start wrapping it up here with maybe we can cycle back quickly to the course. I mean, I was going to ask you kind of a crazy question, but let me ask you that first, and then we'll cycle back to the course. I don't want to let that one go. But we talked about the anti-grav and the UFOs, and you mentioned the Pentagon thing. I'm surprised there is groups all over the world working on this type of technology. I mean, have you been approached by people? Have you had offers at all, or have you been involved at all in any kind of maybe advancement of some technology? And you don't have to answer, but
yes, I was approached by many different groups throughout the years. Some that were private groups and some that were, part of larger
organizations.
Yes, we're just gonna call that way.
Yeah.
And there's a large effort that's being made, even public efforts at NASA that are being made. NASA is publicly attempting to produce a vacuum drive, that is warping space-time. I mean, this is part of what's actually happening in the world.
Is that M drive? Is that the M drive? That one?
No,
the M drive
is something completely different.
Wow.
It's the M drive is actually one of the first evidence that propulsion can be generated in the structure of space-time, by electromagnetic field. This is a little conic object that's just blocked on both sides, in which you just input, microwaves, very simple device, and it produced trust without anything coming out of the device. There's no, it appears to violate the laws of motion. That's why, although it was invented almost 20 years ago, it has not been recognized until recently, when NASA finally, after the Chinese tested it, NASA finally tested it and said, oh yeah, it does produce thrust, with fairly low level of energy.
Wow.
And so that's one thing. So the only conclusion they could come to was that it was pushing against the structure of the vacuum. It was pushing against the Planck field. That they actually published. And but the same organization within NASA that is research that measured the EM drive is the same part of NASA that's trying to make a warp drive. And they've been trying to make a warp drive by harvesting some of the energy that's in the structure of space to create a wormhole, or like a singularity, a point of high density that, can be displaced in front of the ship to make the ship gravitationally attracted to some. It's like the carrot in front of the donkey, it keeps trying to get it, but it can't fall in the black hole because it's just in front of it. Yeah.
I wonder if the first people, they'll try and flick it on and they'll just be like, bloop. Accidentally just on the other side of the universe, and they're like, shit, how do we get back?
Kind of like the Philadelphia experiment.
Or like Star Trek Voyager, where they just got lost and they're like trying to get home, because you just...
Oh, shoot, yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, what about, what happened
dodging
to Bob?
stuff.
Well, who's volunteering for the next try?
Yeah.
Because I guess, when you're flying through space at this insane speed, you're not actually traveling through space. You're just existing, a blinking and blinking sort of thing. So you don't need to dodge stuff.
Right.
I always feel like when in Star Trek, they don't just hit the odd rock.
Yeah. You must feel somewhat vindicated after going against the grain of academia for so long and doing your own thing, your own research, and now you're teaming up with other physicists and stuff like that. But that you're actually recognized by some of these greater organizations for your work informally,
Right. Well, it's coming along, it takes a long time. It's hard to go against the grain. People that have been working on these things for decades, and they are, been educated in a certain way. It's very difficult to change the paradigm, but it's really moving nicely now. I think there's more and more people realizing it was not so obvious 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I was going to physics conferences. It wasn't so obvious that there was a problem in physics, meaning physicists were happy with two vastly different theories that described the small and the big, and they didn't see any reason. They thought, oh, the string theory is coming and it's going to resolve this, and we don't really need. And it was and they were very confident. I was told multiple times, oh no, we're going to have this all beautiful and clean within the next few years.
Yeah, that leftover stuff is just dark energy and dark matter. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We'll figure that out later.
Yeah, we'll detect it eventually. We just got to get a few $1 billion, and we'll have it, and it's all gonna come together. And so, there was a lot of arrogance, in fact, and so it was hard. And but now, I hadn't done all the work necessary to be able to bring the proof. Now I have. And, that's a different world, so these kind of things happen. They start to support a theory. Well, typically those eventually become, the prevalent theory that's utilized.
Yeah. Well, and plus you're bringing it to the public. I mean, you've got it. I love how you've got it out there in your Resonance Foundation, your Resonance Science Foundation website. that whole documentary, The Connected Universe, was made about you, which was fantastic for people. They can go to Vimeo and watch that.
Yeah, with Picard narrating.
Yeah.
Picard.
Yeah, Sir Patrick on the narration. So
Yeah.
can you maybe just talk, and we'll let you go here. We don't want to keep you too long, but about the courses, just to tell people about the courses quickly again and how they can start learning all this stuff. I mean, how to think differently and about the physics and all that.
And where we can get our ARK crystals.
Yeah, and the ARK crystal too. Yeah.
Yeah. The course can be gotten at Resonance Science, the Resonance Science Foundation. So it's resonanceScience.org. And it's free. You can register right there and take the course. And we have a forum people can talk about all these ideas on. And since we just opened free, I started to do like a 2-hour question and answer session every week, on Wednesdays, where I, for each of the modules of the course, and I talk about that specific module on each of those weeks. And so, people can participate on that too. That's free as well. And we're building, a strong community. We have, some 70,000 people involved. Millions of people are following us on Facebook and so on. And so it is getting, very great conversation that's going on, and people participating is a great way. People can get their ARK crystal at arkcrystal.com, ARK Crystals with an S.com. And as well, we have a research lab that's called Taurus Tech. And we're doing a lot of theoretical research that we're in the middle of getting put in place to be published soon. And people should keep their eye on that, because when it comes out, it's going to have really important information for the public. It's going to be a technical paper. It's going to be for the more technical public at first, but we're going to write layman articles to explain what we're saying in the paper. We are planning even equation per equation to explain what the equation says, so that people understand what we're talking about.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks so much for doing that. I think it's really important work, just proving that we are all connected. I mean, it really is changing people's paradigms. So
Totally.
I'll put all those links in the show notes for everything. And we really want to thank you for your time spent here. And it's nice to meet you.
I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, it's all good. All good.
Hopefully those little ones will be reading some textbooks with some unified field theory in it one day.
Yes, it's really amazing to see as well people taking the course that are the young population, including 10-year-olds and so on, and they get it. It's really, really good, and they ask really good questions, and the dialogue is remarkable. People are really opening up to these ideas, and it's really important that we have the good science to come with it, so that that it's based on something solid, and that's really critical.
Awesome. Right on. Thanks a lot, Nassim.
Right on.
Thanks
for coming on the show, Nassim. Have a good night. Enjoy your quarantine. And
thank you. You guys too.
Come back anytime.
Hello to Canada over there in the great north. I miss you all.
It's not white now. It's sort of starting to color up a little bit slowly.
Oh, good. You guys are on freezing.
Yeah. I wonder if the ARK crystal is good for COVID.
Oh,
Can't hurt.
Maybe, yeah.
Can't hurt.
Well, it helps people with vitality and energy levels. It definitely helps plants. That we've proved that. So,
yeah.
I since we're mostly made out of water, I don't see why it wouldn't help humans.
Yeah, just don't say that word or we'll get censored, Darren. Be careful.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Okay, see you later.
Right on. Thanks, Nassim. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Now's a chat with the one and only Nassim Haramein. What'd you think, buddy?
That was Yeah, it was good. I don't know. I find like when I'm in the show, I have more epiphanies and I understand it more than when I'm studying for the show. I really do. Maybe it's because I'm really focused and listening or something like that. I don't know.
Epiphanies.
Yeah, or just
Like
just clarity.
like
I
more
just feel
aha
clarity. Like
clarity?
the whole. At first, when I first learned about when I was with Michael, like 6 years ago or 5 years ago at his lecture, and learning about the mass of the proton and the spin, radius, all the stuff, the holographic part. It just sometimes it just sounds like words, but now I picture it more. I visualize it more as like the way space is shaped.
You're really coming along.
The geometric aspect of it.
Really coming
And
along.
maybe that UFO I saw was something to do with,
I wasn't expecting you to bring up the UFO,
I
but
thought, what the hell, might
Yeah.
as well.
you only get to talk to Nassim Haramein
made-
once. You might as well bring up your Israel UFO site.
He made a tetrahedron crystal, right? I mean, and I saw an icosahedron UFO, so I felt like there's a connection there.
I feel like we should order some ARK crystals this year, 2020.
That's our goal. Let's manifest
Order
it.
the ARK crystals.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's manifest it. We should.
Grimerica.ca/support. Anyway, yeah, that was a fun one.
You like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it's a great video. The courses are great. Marshall, I mean, I was gonna talk to Nassim about it, but we've had Adam Apollo is helping him out. Marshall Efforts is the host of those videos with the courses. We had him on about his book Cosmometry. That's a fantastic chat, and we've had
Was it cosmometry?
I think that's what it's called. Yeah, yeah, and we've also had. Jamie Janover on a couple times.
Twice.
Who's,
3 times?
Who's helping
Twice.
Nassim out too. I mean, he's surrounded by a bunch of great folks as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
Be fun to do.
And I love the mix of like spiritual. He goes back to these ancient things and the ancient sites, and they're very open to, the higher consciousness aspect of all this as well.
It'd be good to go on a little contact with him one day. Go to Egypt with him.
Yep.
Hang out in the Great Pyramid. Heard some stories. Sounds like a fantastic cat to hang out with. Does a fantastic interview from his lockdown. Finally got Nassim on the show. Fantastic. Big thanks shout out to Brian for helping us put that one together.
Thanks, B Lord.
We love you, Brian Lord. Oh, I doxed him. Is that doxing, or is it only if I give his address and stuff?
Yeah, you can say names.
You
That's
can
just
say names.
Name dropping.
Okay, that's just name dropping. Brian Lord. Grimerica.ca/support. Join our contribute to our ARK Crystal Slush Fund, and help us keep the wheels turning here in our little self-made media thing in the basement. We've got all this equipment. We got the new gear. Got the sound sounding good. We got the internet bills to pay for. We got rent to pay for. We got hosting to pay for. All these bills to pay for. Couldn't do it without you guys. We'd have had to close up shop if it weren't for our supporters. There'd be no show. That interview wouldn't have happened. No supporters. Luckily, we do have supporters, and they made sure that interview did happen. If you want to be one of those people to make sure the next interview happens, maybe with your hero, Grimerica.ca/support. Remember when you got to interview Theo Fleury?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Why did that come up?
he was like your hero.
Well, he wasn't like
When
my
you were little.
contemporary hero. Yeah. At
What's
one
contemporary?
Point, yeah. What?
When you were little, he was your
modern,
hero.
Modern, like
It's funny.
nowadays.
And then you ended up spinning into an addiction problem.
Exactly.
When you were looking up to Theo Fleury, who at the time you probably
Yeah.
didn't realize
Yeah.
was spinning out with an addiction problem.
Yeah. Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was great.
So it's almost like you were probably thinking, I want to be like Fleury.
and I got it.
Yeah.
Minus the millions
Minus the
of
millions of
spent
dollars,
on
yeah.
blow.
You're probably better off. If you had millions, you might not be here.
Yeah.
You might have just had
I wouldn't have made
you'd
it.
have a really nice
No, I wouldn't have made it.
tombstone.
Yeah, I wouldn't have made it.
America.ca/support, guys. We love you. Help support to the show. If you're getting a little value from the podcast, send a little value back our way. Of course, if you check out the show notes, there's a ton of different ways you can support the show in there that don't cost you a dime. You can review the show, share the show, sign up for the newsletter, sign your friends up for the newsletter, get some swag over at the Redbubble shop. All sorts of stuff you could do. Send cash and books, send seeds, send whatever. Send feedback, send
Synchronicities, sightings.
It seems like we haven't got much spam lately. Let's make it a spam
Well,
week.
because we got the
Let's
chats
see
now, right?
how
Everybody's in
much
the chat. So.
Spam we can generate for Graham.
No,
in a
it's
week.
okay. You can just join the chats.
GRAHAM at Grimerica.com. Spam that motherfucker. Let's blow up his inbox. We love you. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. 108.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. Did you know that was the exact time with the other one we did?
Which one?
With Miguel? I even emailed him. I said, "Guess what? 108 exactly."
How do you know how long it was?
You told me it was 108.
Did I?
I think you secretly watch.
No.
You're the one that.
You're the one that cares.
Well, you're the one that started the closing of the show, so you set the time pace.
Right.
I wouldn't have stopped him.
Well, he could have. He's dragging out the outro. Is what I was.
I felt like he shut it down a little early.
I did too.
Yeah, I feel like we could have got another half hour out.
I would have gone with Nassim until
he was like,
until
"Listen,
he was
motherfuckers."
No,
like,
he's
like, "Look, it's dark. My kids are in bed. I gotta go, man. You really gotta let me go."
Is this still live
Yeah,
on YouTube?
still live yet.
We don't want to say too much on YouTube.
No, I was enjoying the
I'm
mic.
just
because this is
Calling
going to be
a little
out
bit.
there.
I'm
like, this is
enjoying the
gonna be out
Michael
there, right?
calling you out on
Is this
YouTube
staying out
on
there?
the Nassim Haramein interview that'll probably get viewed tens of
Look,
thousands
I
of times.
didn't want to be rude. I didn't want him to feel
Look,
like he's,
You don't have to defend
Luck.
yourself. I'm just saying,
Luck.
if it was me,
Yeah.
that's all.
No, I'm
Look.
not defending him. I'm just
That was a
telling you
great
what my
interview. Totally
interview.
defending
it was
yourself.
it was 108. Come on,
Yeah.
it was perfect.
108%.
I
It
don't know.
could've
Whatever
been.
you said, 108 was.
No, I didn't want him to feel like he was
Minutes.
like stuck
could've
between
been
worlds.
3.14.
Stuck between his little universe and his big universe.
What's
you know?
Fibonacci, like 1.69 or something? Hey Siri, what's the Fibonacci sequence?
1618.
What's a number, not a sequence?
The Fibonacci sequence is a British.
What's the Fibonacci ratio?
Here's what I found.
Ah, for fuck's sakes.
What's 1.618? I thought.
Is that what it
Yeah,
is?
probably. Just look it up.
Ugh, but
Siri.
I was trying to just talk to it.
Well, try again. You can't say Fibonacci. He doesn't understand what Fibonacci is. Like you got to pronounce it
Hey
right
Siri,
first.
it did recognize that part.
Did it?
Hey Siri, what's the Fibonacci number?
In mathematics, the Fibonacci numbers, commonly denoted Fn, form a sequence called the Fibonacci sequence,
yeah.
such that each number is the sum of the two preceding
Hey
ones,
Siri, what's the
starting from 0
Shut the
and
fuck up.
She's
Hey
explaining
Siri,
it.
what's the Fibonacci sequence numbers?
I found this on the web.
1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Oh, this is math is not that fun.
It's the golden ratio.
The next number is found by adding up the two numbers before it. 0, 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 3
Right.
plus 5 is 8.
1.618 is the golden ratio. That's what you're thinking.
How often do you think Nassim uses Siri to come up with mathematical formulas?
All the time. I actually got an email the other day. Someone was complaining about that mushroom episode. The second one we did where I kept saying the night before when it was just me and Joey, I said, "Hey Siri" so many times. Still fucks up people's phones. They're listening to it and they hear, "Hey Siri," and it stops the episode from playing.
That's awesome.
Anyway, the golden ratio is 1.618.
That's what I just told
Blake
you.
Art. I think Blake Art beat you.
No, I beat
I'm,
him.
I'm certain he beat you.
Nope.
He's got some theory that's got to do with the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio and all that. He sent me a bunch of stuff. He wants to do a show about it, I think.
Blake Hart?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we should
Sounds
figure that
good.
out. We got some openings in May, eh?
Yeah, we got some openings in May. Let's do it, Blake.
Spam Graham, Blake. Graham at Grimerica.com.
I think he's been connecting with me on the Instagram. So
Twitter. He's been trying to connect with me on Discord.
Yeah, we gotta
It's a bad spot.
we gotta
for
be
that.
careful because this is like
Live.
this is still gonna be on YouTube, right? Until it
Totally.
gets so let's
Forever.
just like
Graham at Grimerica.com. Spam him like a motherfucker.
I'm just gonna say a bunch of words that'll get us this deleted.
COVID-19.
Well, yeah,
COVID-19
we've already said all the words. haven't we?
COVID-19.
Sandy Hook. All right, guys.
Then why haven't they yet? Some
Thanks for
people-
tuning
Because
in.
we're not because
We're
we're
not
flying so
monetized.
low under the radar, they don't give a shit about
Not
us.
monetized,
They do
that's
not
why,
give
yeah.
a flying fuck
And let's
about
just
the
keep it
Grimerica
like
show.
that.
Let's just keep it like that.
Yeah.
Support the show, Grimerica.ca/support.
Thanks
We
for
love you.
where do we look? Thanks
like
for
at the
everybody.
camera.
Yeah.
So like when you get to 10,000, that's when they cut you off.
No,
no.
we don't monetize, so I don't.
You
I
think it's only about monetization?
No,
it seems to be that everyone that I've
50,000
talked to has been even Tripoli. I was like, "Well, will you monetize?" And he was like, "Yes." So everyone I've talked to that's been,
But how many numbers does he have?
he's got like 70,000 or something.
That's what I'm saying.
50,000 views, something.
Well, 50,000 subscribers or 50,000 independent watches. or
50,000
something
subscribers.
Like that.
Yeah.
that's when it changes
Yeah,
and you go into
yeah.
a new realm, and
Yeah.
that's when they look at you.
We
They
get
don't audit
tons
you
of
until you
emails
get
from
to that.
advertisers now.
So then what you want to do is
really?
when you
Yeah.
get to like 45,000, you want to tell all your
Yeah.
fervent fans to drop out for a little while so that you don't get up over it, you know? Because then they'll
No,
cut you
that's a
off
fucking
completely.
great point. Let's do that.
Or
Let's-
divide off into a different channel and only tell some of them.
But
about
I
it.
still haven't found a single channel that's been shut down that wasn't monetized.
Yeah.
Well, everybody monetizes, right?
We don't.
Well, I mean everybody else. So
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, we wouldn't get anything if we monetized, right? We don't have enough.
like
anyway,
even in
so.
super chats, nobody throws you any bones.
Super chats don't count.
That doesn't count.
Doesn't count. I don't turn monetization on for the videos. It's all goes back to those fucking ad shit.
There was another thing, and this is